All right. I think everything is all right. I think everything is good. Everything should be up to date. And if that is the case, let me move my microphone away because looks like I'm having some mic issues that I might be too loud. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. And this is a live stream talking about the severe weather event, potential tornado outbreak tomorrow for November 29th, 2022. So that makes the day before November 28th, 2022. That is today. Today is Monday. Hope you all had a nice Monday. We do have a very interesting risk here of severe weather. This does include a 4 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here for portions of central to northern Mississippi, extreme southwestern portions of Tennessee, extreme southeastern portions of Arkansas, and northeastern, or even, I should say, northern portions of Louisiana near Vicksburg, Mississippi. In the surrounding areas as well, we also have a 3 out of 5 in the severe weather scale indicated in the orange in the enhanced risk. We have a 2 out of 5 in the yellow and a 1 out of 5 in the green. Now, if you're in the 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and 4 out of 5, I would highly recommend that you guys pay attention to this stream, or let alone any weather service that is available for you guys tomorrow, as there could be some significant weather out and about within this area. We'll start with the less significant impacts first, and then we'll get to the more significant ones as we progress. Look at the hail parameters. 5% chance for 1-inch size hail or larger within the brown, 15% chance within the yellow, and it's not really as large of a risk as some others. This would be equivalent to a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale at maximum. And then we take a look at the wind risk. It is now there is now an additional color, I should say. So we mentioned the 5% in brown, the 15% in yellow. We have a 30% chance in red. This is for winds around 58 miles per hour or greater. In the previous outlook, they actually had a significant risk for wind at the furthest eastern extent. That has now been alleviated. If the significant risk does come back, that'll be for hurricane force winds or greater within that general vicinity. But we take a look at the more significant aspect of this event here, and I'll zoom in for you guys so that way you guys can kind of get a better perspective as to where exactly this is at. And actually, it might be better for us to go over to the actual area where it's at. We'll go to the SPC outlook. We'll go to the day 2 outlook, which would be right there. No, it's actually probably better for us to go to the national risk and go to the pivotal models that way. So real quickly, as I put up some form of satellite imagery, just so you guys can kind of just see what sort of shenanigans is kind of underway. That looks like it's out in the middle of the water, so we'll put it on that for right now. There we go. And as we look at this here real quickly, you can see here is the final risk for the day 2 outlook. We'll go to the tornado risk here, and you guys can see the colors are pretty vibrant. You have 2% in green, 5% in brown, 10% in yellow, 15% in red, and all of those are whatever chance you could see a tornado within a 25-mile radius. But you also see this little gridded area. Now, I understand we have a lot of these grids here because of the county, so it's very hard to see. But the grid that is kind of in a horizontal axis, just like this, this right here is a significant risk. You can see right here at the bottom right-hand part of your screen. That basically means that that is a 10% chance or greater of seeing a significant tornado within that area as well. So that's something to take into account as this moves on through. We can read the actual discussion here, and it actually says here in the summary, quote, severe thunderstorms capable of producing tornadoes and wind damage along with some hail are expected Tuesday afternoon and evening, extending into the overnight period across parts, not portions, parts of the lower to mid Mississippi Valley and parts of the southeast. A few strong/long track tornadoes will be possible. with that being said, I will be live tomorrow, so if you want to come back to the channel, sometime around 12 to 1 in the afternoon Central Standard Time is when I probably will be streaming. So for the people on the East Coast, just add an hour to what I just mentioned. That'd be around 1 or 2 o'clock is when I would probably be live. So that is kind of the discussion from the Storm Prediction Center here as this continues to move on through. And let's get into the actual model portion of this all. And let's start out with the HRRR, because the HRRR is a good model to really start out with as just kind of a general base. Not the most accurate model out of all of them, in my honest opinion, or at least not my safest model to go to. But this is something that could look for just the middle of the road. What are the opinions of some of these models going on through? So we take a look at that here. We'll look at the reflectivity in itself. Let's see. There we go. I zoomed it out. Just one more so you can kind of see. The time, it's a little difficult to tell, but it is in Zulu time, so it's right there. Subtract it by 6 hours, you'll get the actual time into which this stuff is actually happening. If you're in Central, if you're in Eastern, you have to only subtract it by 5 hours. Eventually, that'll all change because, of course, daylight savings time will no longer be a thing after a year. So, you know, weird conversions, you know, in the middle of spring, you know, if you were in the East Coast, you would only have to subtract 4, and the Central would be, you know, subtract 5. Now you add an hour that you have to subtract from, and now I have to subtract by 5. You guys have to subtract by 6, which sucks. But, oh well, is what it is. Let's look at the reflectivity, and by 16Z, all right, so this is about 10 o'clock in the morning, a lot of scattered showers and thunderstorms begin to kind of develop across the board, but nothing really anchors to kind of, you know, become relatively significant. And that does change here because at 18Z, once again, 12 o'clock Central, you see a line of storms that start to form over here near Bosher County, basically near the Alexandria and DeRidder general vicinities, south of Shreveport. And that will kind of, you know, march on through across portions of central and northern Louisiana. We also have some more scattered showers and thunderstorms that develop over here along the Mississippi River and the border of Mississippi and Arkansas. And that'll continue to march on through and basically, you know, begin to really form across the board. A lot of different storms. The only thing here that is going to be the difficulty within this event, or actually before I even get into that, there's really good news and then there's bad news with this event. All right, and we'll start with the less significant one, which is the bad news. The bad news is that the models during the period of fall and winter cannot really forecast energy all too well because it thinks it's winter, and it knows that during winter you don't really have severe weather setups. So because of that, you don't really have as much energy as you typically would on the models outputted. However, the good news is that it doesn't really matter all too much because then there's a couple of things that, you know, still this model has to try and get right and other models have to try and get right, which is some inconsistencies. And we'll get into that here by taking a look at what we see right in front of us. We have a lot of these storms. You only notice, though, that within all these storms, only like probably 4 or 5 of them are relatively big. And these ones, I actually just circled 4. The other ones are relatively, you know, clustered together. But the thing here is that with all these, you know, scattered showers and thunderstorms, there's only 4 that end up being the big ones that could try to produce tornadoes. That would be the general concern if you were trying to expect a tornado event. The environment is not too favorable for thunderstorms to really sustain. At least in the lower levels, you don't really have a lot of significant rising in the atmosphere. So when we talk about energy, we talk about convective available potential energy. There's enough energy, don't get me wrong, but how that energy is distributed within the atmosphere, if it was a lot more centralized towards the surface, we would be talking about a bona fide tornado outbreak pretty much so widespread. But due to the fact that it is relatively distributed from the surface all the way up into the upper portions of the atmosphere, and that rising of that, you know, unstable energy, which convective available potential energy is basically the displacement between that warm air rising and that cold air sinking. So the displacement between the two, how quickly those two air masses displace from each other, can determine as to how much energy you have. And we don't have really a whole lot of that displacement at the lower levels, which means that if storms do form, it is really going to be difficult for them to sustain due to the fact that you don't have a whole lot of that consistency there. So that is one thing to note. Obviously, the models are having difficulties with, predicting these style of events with temperatures and dew points and maybe even energy levels. But unless if it resolves that surface level, which it usually doesn't, all right? Usually, whatever it says on the, on the models with the lower level lapse rates and stuff like that, it usually holds true to the actual event. It just doesn't really do it. And that means that some of these storms could end up just not forming. And we've had instances like this in the past. I think to March of, this past March of earlier this year, we had a moderate risk across this very same area, but nothing really happened. It was a giant wind risk due to the fact that all the storms that were expected to form out in front of the cold front didn't. It ended up just kind of fizzing out because when it started to form, those lower level lapse rates, that rising in the lower levels of the atmosphere, was just not sufficient enough for it to sustain updrafts. On the other hand, we also have to talk about the saturation. So what I mean by saturation is that all levels of the atmosphere in the lower levels, it is moist, all right? It is relatively moist, but it is somewhat too moist. For people who don't know what they're about to see, I'm going to take a sounding. And this basically takes a look at the profile of the atmosphere as it extends with height. So bear with me here as I talk about this. I mentioned the lapse rates. In this sounding, unironically, according to the HRRR, this is actually a very good sounding. I'm not going to lie, the lower level lapse rates are actually sufficient for this thunderstorm to form and sustain, probably even be significant, even if there is a little bit of contamination. And I'll go to full screen so that you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So here's the sounding. The actual lapse rate in itself is down here. The lower level lapse rate, the surface of the 3 kilometer lapse rate, is 6.5, and that meets the criteria, 6.5 and above, for storms to sustain. But we also have to talk about the saturation, and that basically tells you how much humidity you have within this thunderstorm. And in order for us to take a look at humidity, we need to understand, first off, what causes humidity, and second off, where to find it on this chart, which would be right here within this box right there. So humidity is basically the displacement between temperature and dew point. The closer the temperature and the dew point is, the higher the humidity. And then, of course, the opposite effect when dew points and temperatures are further away from each other, the lower the relative humidity actually is. So when you have a whole lot of that together, you get high humidity values. And if it continues to stay relatively high across a large spectrum, it could be too saturated. It could have too much moisture within the storm, which can essentially kind of bog down the updraft. So the updraft basically is the rising motion in the storm, which allows it to continue to, sustain itself by generating more hail, a lot of development with its mesocyclone, into which then could potentially produce tornadoes. But if you have a lot of saturation, that saturation could drive up the humidity, which means that some precipitation could form within that area. And if precipitation, especially if it's heavy enough, gets into that updraft to the point to where when you have your updraft and you have that rising air, if you have stuff that's combating it and it just kind of goes against it, that updraft's not going to want to rise as much. It's going to be kind of weathered down a little bit by its own precipitation. And so by that happening, that could also deteriorate some showers and thunderstorms, which could make things a lot better for us here on the desk in tracking these storms, because then we wouldn't have any significant storms that could produce tornadoes. But on the other hand, we could take a look at these parameters across the board. We'll start out with the 500 millibar wind shear, and we'll play it through as to how this is going to approach. This is tonight into tomorrow morning, and the upper level wind shear here at 500 millibars. You can start here with what's happening right now. Relatively low across the board with these kind of light pinks and dark purples. That is relatively low values of wind shear. And we'll switch it back to the pivotal model so you guys can actually see for reference. There it is. Boom. All right, there you go. Now you have it. Whole lot better. So the scale is at the bottom part of your screen in knots. You can see that for reference. And as we play this along, you'll see that these colors start to get a lot more vibrant. And especially as we get to the afternoon and the evening, you see some reds start to creep in. And that means that your upper level wind shear, which is moving from the southwest to the northeast, is starting to scream at this point. And your sustainability within these showers and thunderstorms could potentially exist. At the same time, we also have the 850 millibar wind shear, which is basically our low-level jet. This could potentially enhance lower-level circulation based off of how significant it actually is. And we can tell because if the wind is starting to become perpendicular, or at least coming more from the south, then we might see some spin with height in the counterclockwise direction. So let's see how this kind of formulates here as we get towards 10Z, 11Z, 12Z, all the way up to 19Z. We have a lot of wind that's coming from the south-southwest, which is essentially helping this storm development here by starting to rotate with height ever so slightly. And if we switch over to the surface precipitation, if we see surface winds that are kind of perpendicular to the upper level wind shear, which is this giant arrow up at top, let's take a look at that. And let's take a look and see if we have some major veering going on. And yeah, some of our surface winds are coming due south, almost due south, maybe even from the south-southeast here from the Gulf of Mexico. And whenever you see that, that's when you know you have some major veering, which means your wind shear, you can check that off if a storm forms. You could definitely get something tornadic with that, within that storm if something does happen. On the other hand, let's take a look at the severe weather. We'll take a look at something interesting. We'll take a look at two things. We'll look at the mixed layer cape, which is essentially when the storm starts to mix and when things start to kind of precipitate together, and when the mesocyclone and the updraft really start to get a lot of its action going. You see that there is some energy here. We definitely have some in upwards of the light blues and the yellows, which is sufficient enough for some showers and thunderstorms to form or sustain. Whenever we get those blues, that's really what we want to watch out for. And you can see how quickly it rises up further north. It vects very, very quickly along the Mississippi River. And that moisture return from this system is streaming in from the Gulf of Mexico as it continues to supply a lot of very warm and unstable air as it continues to move off towards the deep south. So definitely something to note. And then the energy continues to linger there all the way through until the cold front starts to move about and deteriorate it in towards Wednesday morning. But you can check mark that box. You have sufficient amounts of energy throughout the entire storm. But I mentioned that within the surface levels of the storm, could we get enough energy to potentially even form some storms within that? And indeed, there are some pockets to where that could potentially occur. You can see a lot of these yellows and reds, and you see that consistently across the board here, that potentially there is enough energy at the lower levels. This is the 0 to 3 kilometer AGL, or above ground level cape, which mentions that there is definitely enough energy in some of these spots. Now, as soon as we get to 22Z, which is towards the nighttime hours, starting to get into the evening, into the nighttime hours, we have some of these pockets, which means that we have little to no cape that could form, or I should say sustain, some of these thunderstorms. So if a thunderstorm that is moving from these areas and they're going off into the area with no cape, or with no surface, 0 to 3 kilometer cape, or I call it 3 cape, a storm's not really going to sustain. So that's really going to be one of those things to monitor as this continues to move about. Does it hit those pockets of no cape? If it does, then it probably won't sustain all too much. So that is something to note with that. I also want to take a look at the lapse rate here from 700 millibars to 500 millibars. And right around here, this is when things start to get pretty interesting. All right. So we're at 17Z and 18Z, 19Z right here. This is your lift with height, all right? And you practically want these yellow areas to maybe even these light blue areas. If you have that, there's a good chance that you could potentially see some localized thunderstorms that could take advantage of that environment. But if you have these dark blues or even these gray areas over here, you're not really going to get storms that can sustain due to the fact that just the environment is not favorable for it. The lift within that area is just not that good. So something to note, these pockets here, you can see we have a pocket over here near Monroe and Vicksburg. That could be something to watch. Of course, you have the stuff behind it, but that might be too far behind these showers and thunderstorms. So you really kind of want to look at where the environment is favorable for severe weather. And that would kind of be right within this area right here, where the highest amount of lapse rates would be out in front of that pocket that is due west of the activity. So we'll play it again. You can see as we get to 22Z, there we go. We have that pocket once again that's starting to surge through. And just these little areas, if you can get a storm right within that area, yes, you will have your storm that can potentially produce your strong tornado. So something to kind of watch out for with that. Now, some meme material here real quickly. I don't advise anyone to really do this if you're trying to forecast tornadoes and stuff like that, because this is really just cherry picking and not understanding the actual environment in front of you. But this is the significant tornado parameter. Once again, never use this. Always try to go it by a parameter by parameter standpoint, and don't just look at one that takes into account all of them, because these algorithms sometimes are flawed because they don't actually look at the whole picture, how everything is escalating together. But we can take a look at the significant tornado parameter. We see a lot of reds with, in some situations, even some pinks, and that could indicate that we have a relatively moderate level of significant tornado parameter. Now, unironically, as soon as I click on a sounding to try and see what that is, this basically shows me exactly what I've been saying about the potential of storms not forming. And I will go to the full screen again so you guys can kind of see. There is the full screen. I'll zoom in here right now. The contamination on the left-hand side is evident, obviously. But you notice the surface to 3 kilometer AGL lapse rate. And you notice it says 6.3 Celsius per kilometer. That is below the 6.5 threshold, which is something that I am very, very dependent on with my, if I wanted to forecast showers and thunderstorms actually forming and sustaining, you want it to be over 6.5. And the fact that it's not, that does leave a little room for concern in regards to the sustainability of these thunderstorms, which would obviously be good news if that does come into fruition. I'll take another sounding a bit more to the north. That one, once again, take a look. Same thing happens here. 5.9 degrees Celsius per kilometer. Not very good within that sounding either. So it just really depends. It really depends upon if you can get a storm, whether it merges with another storm so that it can sustain. That would be an interesting way to keep lapse rates up. Some weird storm physics that happen within that through cell mergers, or if you just have some form of channeling within a specific spot, you could get a storm, but there's just too many uncertainties as of right now in regards to, can you get a storm? All right, if you can, will it sustain? If you can answer those two questions with yes, you're going to get your tornado. But it's very hard to answer yes with that, with what we've got. So .3 is not fine for Dixie. Note March 30th, 2022. Had a lot worse shear than it shows here. So why do the photographs still look bad, though? Your photographs can look bad, but the thing of it is that your wind shear and your energy levels are two separate planes. They're two separate things that go together to actually make the storm. So you can't have one without the other, or at least decently without the other. And what I'm saying is that it's very much so inconsistent with the values of what we've got. So we'll go to the wrap now. We'll turn to the wrap model because the wrap model is the more accurate model, I should say, with most of everything. It is a good model. It is a very good model, and I recommend that even though it is low resolution, most people actually use it. I'm not saying don't use the HRRR. I'm not saying don't use the NAM 3 kilometer. But if you're going to make a decision, I would include the wrap model with your decision if you need to. So we'll take a look at the wrap model. Of course, as I said, relatively low resolution, but you can see the consistency across the board with how many showers and thunderstorms it forms. And now we'll actually get into the severe weather parameter aspect of it by looking at that lapse rate. So once again, will the lapse rates be good enough for these things to sustain? And across the board, you know, there's some pockets of low blues, but you do have a lot of these light blues and even some yellows. So if you get, once again, it's the same thing. You get something that forms within that, you know, more power to you. But if you get stuff like this to where it's 5.7 degrees Celsius per kilometer, that is not sustainable for showers and thunderstorms over here. So this is definitely something to make a note of as this continues to move about. So with what I just talked about, all right, that entire monologue that I just, you know, said, all right, this is the one thing to take away. Actually, there's two things to take away. First off, regardless of what happens, I will be live streaming tomorrow, particularly sometime around 12 to 1 Central Standard Time. Okay. For people on the East Coast, that's 1 to 2 Central or 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. So make a note of that. By the way, we will have a chaser. We will have a chaser. It's not Matt. It's the Allegheny Stormfront chasing group that we have that comes onto the stream every now and then. So I'm happy to have them back. I'm actually going to call them after the stream, believe it or not. But the other thing to take away, we have a 4 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here, indicated in this red. This is for portions of Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Louisiana. If you're in the red, if you're in the orange, or even in the yellow, I would pay attention to the weather tomorrow. Either by, you know, having a NOAA weather radio, having your, you know, emergency alert notifications on, you know, in case the National Weather Service does issue something. Stay tuned to the stream here by turning on notifications, so that way, whenever I do, you know, stream tomorrow, you guys can just come on and watch it that way. Whatever. But I would highly recommend watching out for the storms as they move on through. And I'm looking to start streaming right as soon as the risk poses a threat, right when it starts, which, as I said, would be sometime around 12 to 1 Central Standard Time is when storms could start to form within this general area. So please be mindful, and hopefully we can continue to try and, you know, work this out. But yes, this will be in the afternoon. This will be in the afternoon tomorrow, and we will more than likely be live streaming all the way up until the end of this event as well. But yeah, there's a lot of inconsistency with some of these maps. I do want to look at something here real quickly. And this right here, what I'm looking at, not the photographs. I don't want the photographs. I want to take a look at this right here. These are our crossovers with our surface-based cape. This is according to the wrap model. And the wrap model usually is a big helper with this. So at 18Z, which is at 12 Central Standard Time, we start to have some energy that starts to input itself here across central and north central portions of Louisiana. That veering right there is actually pretty decent, and so that is something to kind of monitor. You might get one supercell that forms over here near Alexandria, and it could push on through. The one thing that I do have to mention, for anyone who's chasing, there is a portion of Louisiana, I think it's south of I-20, to where you can't go across the Mississippi River. So you really gotta, you know, in order for you to get across the Mississippi River, you gotta go on a main road, like a U.S. road or an interstate, in order to get into the next state over. But definitely some activity that I can anticipate early in Louisiana. And of course, the energy starts to move off towards the northeast, towards Mississippi. We have some higher amounts of energy over here. I'm anticipating probably something over here near, I think it's that's the Greenville area. I think that's Greenville. Let me look here on my map on the side. Of course, you can see as well. Yeah, that is Greenville. So I'm anticipating maybe something over there near Greenville. And unfortunately, Yazoo City. They never seem to get a break, don't they? But over to that area, maybe north of Jackson, somewhere near that Greenwood, Indianola area. That's probably, if I were to chase, I would probably chase near that area. Vicksburg. Vicksburg would probably be a good area to start, for the most part. And then you can look around that way. But you can see here, I'm going to actually move this Google map over here to the side, so that way you guys can kind of see. We'll go to the actual U.S. Satellite, or I should say not the U.S., but the satellite imagery. And you can see, all the way here from Vicksburg, I-20 goes across the Mississippi, and then you go all the way down, and the next road that goes across the Mississippi is the U.S. Highway 425, which, you know, is over near Natchez. So, you know, you see how there isn't really a road that goes across the river, partially because it's so large, but, you know, on the other hand, there's just legitimately no other way to get across, and it's pretty dangerous for storm chasers if they don't know what they're doing. So, you know, for safety purposes, if you were going to chase, you would stay near the Vicksburg area and the Natchez area, and you would go accordingly to that. But I think for safety, you know, if you want to actually get the chase in itself, get a storm, probably Vicksburg is where I would go if I were chasing. So for the people who are asking, because I've seen it a couple times here in the chat, about my opinions on the convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, this is a low end moderate to me right now. I know, you know, the ceiling is pretty high with the parameters from, you know, a kinematic perspective, from, you know, wind shear and all sorts of stuff like that, the veering, the vorticity across the board, you know, with height, that is something to note. But on the other hand, and this is the other thing that really turns the tide for this event. This will really determine as to what actually happens or not. This is the 850 millibar relative vorticity. This is essentially kind of a cheat sheet as to where showers and thunderstorms could really form, you know, where the best chances are for them if you have, you know, your said, you know, energy levels, your wind shear paired with it. So let's get to the time. We know that it's going to be sometime around 18Z through 21Z on Tuesday when these storms actually can start to, you know, potentially pose a risk. And here we are. We have some little blobs of vorticity. You see that right there, right there. Those are your big blobs that could, you know, potentially mean you have these showers and thunderstorms. But then you have these lower values of vorticity. See this? We have these light, you know, yellows across the board. This doesn't really give me a whole lot of confidence as to whether or not a storm could form or not, because you need a lot of that vorticity in order for you to do so. Now, once we get to 0Z, this would be about 6 in the evening. Look at this giant band right here that extends practically from the western portion of Louisiana all the way up towards Vicksburg. That right there could be something to watch out for, especially if a storm forms along that. So, you know, that's the reason why I'm saying, you know, maybe Vicksburg, or Monroe could be an area to watch as this continues to move on through, due to the fact that, you know, that's where the main vorticity lies. You have vorticity right here, right here, right here, and then a whole band that extends all the way down into Texas. So that'll be something to note. That'll be something to note. But I need a lot more vorticity across the board, as well as those lapse rates to really skyrocket in order for me to say, hey, you know, this needs to be upgraded to a high risk. Because right now, you know, this is giving me, you know, very shallow vibes to like March 30th, 2022, where this event didn't really like do a whole lot due to the fact that your lapse rates were just not good, and your saturation from the lower levels to the mid levels were so high to the point to where updrafts just could not sustain. So that is one thing that I'm kind of concerned about in regards to the sustainability of this event. But we'll once again, one more time, look at the convective outlook for tomorrow. You notice that we have a 4 out of 5 in the severe weather scale here in this red. If you're in this red, you need to very much so pay attention tomorrow to the weather around you, as there is the chance for strong tornadoes, some of which could be long tracked within the area, as well as some strong damaging winds and upwards of hurricane force in some spots, and some spotty hail within that area. We also have a 3 out of 5 in orange, 2 out of 5 in yellow, 1 out of 5 in this green, and then a general thunderstorm risk, which is not really all too impactful to people, unless if you don't really like rain in that light green. So to take away from this, if you're in the yellow, if you're in the orange, and if you are certainly in this red, you need to really watch the weather and monitor it tomorrow. As I said, I will be live streaming tomorrow. I will have also chasers that will relay us information whenever they can get to it, but for the most part, we are going to be trying to monitor this event very, very closely, as of course I just mentioned the potential for strong tornadoes is possible, and we would like to get that information out to people who may potentially need it. So if you want to watch it, if you want to watch our live stream tomorrow, please be sure to stay tuned by subscribing and turn on notifications. Hit that bell. I'm planning sometime around 12 to 1 o'clock Central Standard Time is when I'm going to start, live streaming. That would be 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time for people who live along the East Coast. So, for people who may want to tune in, that might be something that you might want to do so. One last thing that I want to say, and I know some people who might think like this. So for the people who are downstream, you see what's happening over here, and you're thinking, oh, well, this thing could potentially move up here further north. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. I think people over here in Illinois, Indiana, as well as portions of northern Kentucky and Ohio, I think you guys are going to be fine. I think, if anything, you guys should just worry about the wind risk, maybe it being somewhat relatively cold, as cold and, wet sucks to be out in. But if you're thinking, this severe weather is going to hit me over here in, like, Chicago or in Indianapolis or Columbus, Cleveland, no. You guys are going to be fine. Don't worry about it. You guys might see some precipitation, like wintry precipitation at minimum, but other than that, I relatively doubt that you guys are really going to get a whole lot of stuff. It'll really be areas near Mayfield, southern portions of Illinois, like extreme southern portions near the Ohio River, like the Paducah areas over in Kentucky and right along the border of that. Maybe as far north as Cape Girardeau in Missouri, and all the way down south towards portions like Memphis and further about towards that. It's like Jackson, Tennessee. You guys can get into that activity. Potentially Nashville. Nashville might be a little bit too far east, but they are in the risk for severe weather. You can see down here, there's actually these larger populations that could be in this actual risk area. You can see that Memphis is in the orange, Nashville is in the yellow, Jackson, Mississippi, and Jackson, Tennessee, they're in the orange, Greenville, Mississippi, South Haven, Bartlett, you all are in the red. All right, let's take a look at the chat here, answer some questions and stuff like that. What about Wednesday? That's a good question. Wednesday, definitely a elongated area of severe weather here for portions of the Appalachians. If you live in these areas, I'm expecting some strong damaging winds and pretty much nothing else. Might see a localized tornado threat, but not really super high to the point to where that is the main risk. But other than that, that is something that can happen right within that area. What's up, Chris? Welcome back to the stream. All right, let's look at the chat, see what questions there can be. Any anticipation for a slight eastward expansion of the categorical outlooks? Maybe a little bit with the enhanced. I think the moderate is fine where it is right now. I think it's just way too inconsistent to try and say, and pinpoint exactly where some things can happen within this event due to those uncertainties that I mentioned earlier on in the stream. By the way, for those who didn't catch what I was talking about within the actual overall event, I highly recommend that if you want the in-depth explanation, you go back in time and you rewind the stream. But essentially, there are some limiting factors within this environment that could limit the sustainability of these thunderstorms before they even produce tornadoes. So that is, something to note within that. Do I think Jackson, Tennessee will get tornadoes? They definitely have a chance, I'll tell you that. They might be a little too far north, but there is a small chance that they can, within that area of Tennessee. So I would definitely watch out. Yeah, Jasmine, it is that time of year, isn't it? It's constant activity of snow and more snow up there. I guess I should try and get used to it if I'm moving up there with Morgan, after we're done with college and whatnot. Do I think a PDS tornado watch could be possible for tomorrow's event? There shouldn't be, but, there very well can. I'm thinking a 70-50 tornado risk, if not a 70-60. What could you see in Mobile, Alabama? Not as big of a risk as the areas in orange and red. I think if anything, it'll be damaging winds and some spotty hail. But I think the tornado risk is going to be mainly to your north, in my honest opinion. But you guys potentially could see some activity in the early afternoon, and that could potentially pose some risk for you all as well. So, something to note. Any chance you think this will be a high risk? I really don't think this should be a high risk. But, I mean, from a parameters perspective, I can understand why. But I just, my perspective of a high risk, really, are the events that I know are going to be 100% going to impact an area. I have the highest confidence of something happening within this area. And from a confidence standpoint, there isn't a whole lot. And for some people who think, well, no, the convective outlook's not from a confidence standpoint, it's from an impact standpoint. Okay, well, let's take a look at it this way then. Do we think that there's going to be a lot of thunderstorms that can impact people? If we don't think that there's going to be a lot of thunderstorms that can impact people with tornadoes and stuff like that, and they're going to be significant and on a widespread scale, then you shouldn't issue the high risk. I think of a high risk, this wasn't a high risk, but the Easter outbreak of 2020 should have been a high risk. All right, 100%. I'm sure everyone knew that it was a high risk, but they didn't pull the trigger on it. And you had 140 some odd tornadoes within the span of, I think it was 32 hours. And, I think of that. I think of the two high risks from last year. Even though those were, high-end moderates to maybe low-end highs, they definitely were, still constituted as potentially high risks. And I think they could have even been verified as high risks if it weren't for the fact that we had the lack of radar data, a radar hole in central portions of, well, not central portions, but, along the Mississippi-Alabama border. So, definitely don't think that this should be a high. Definitely don't think. So, real quickly, I know a lot of people are saying, well, what about my town? What about my city? What about, my state and stuff like that? Let's put it this way. I'll break it down for you guys, within the risk of where I think or what I think should, be what. By the way, I didn't care about the messy mode. I knew that the veering was going to go ape anyways. It would take control of that. That wind shear was mental that day. I'll tell you what, that wind shear scared the crap out of me as soon as I saw it, because when I was talking with my friend, you guys may not remember him, but AJ. I had AJ here on the channel. We were talking about it in our own VC. We saw the models of the NAM 3 kilometer and the HRRR, and we said, oh dear Lord, this is not good. Like, this should be a high. And believe it or not, this was the only day 3 moderate. The only day 3 moderate in SPC history that did not go high on day 1. That was pretty funny. But, this event here, I'll break it down for you guys. Down here and down here, you guys will start seeing your activity sometime around the early afternoon. That's when stuff should really start to fire off. Once we get into the mid to late afternoon, this area right here is going to start to amplify, specifically around the moderate, to where we might see some higher amounts of vorticity, and maybe the lapse rates start to finally heighten a little bit. We start to get heavier amounts of lapse rates. But, once we get to that, once that occurs, then once you start to get to the eastern end of the risk, towards the end of this, towards the overnight hours, it'll start to become a little bit more of a linear threat, with the exception of maybe the lower end of the moderate, into which it could potentially see some more stuff. Now, it's not foolproof, but that's kind of what I'm thinking right now as to what could potentially happen with this event here tomorrow. But if I were to chase, Vicksburg would probably be the area that I would start. Why are people comparing this to December 10th? I don't know why they're comparing it to December 10th, because December 10th didn't have 2 low pressure systems dictating this mode. I don't know. I don't know why people do that. People look at the worst events that happen in, weather history, and they say, oh, it's that. Like, oh, it's April 27th all over again. It's the April, the super outbreak of 2011. Oh, it's more all over again. Oh, blah, 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 blah. No. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And the main reason for that is because this low pressure system right here is dictating what this low pressure system actually right here is doing. This one right here is really setting the tone for the ascent with this other low pressure system. December 10th was horrific, but this is not December 10th due to the fact that December 10th did not have a big low pressure system over Canada swaying this thing, moving across. So, I don't know why that comparison is there. I really don't. But oh well. We'll pull up the 500 millibar wind shear here so you guys can see. There is the low pressure system that I was talking about. There's the other one that's dipping in with this jet stream. And you'll see the wind shear from this low pressure system basically amplify as this thing makes a curl. It actually curls around that low pressure system up there. You see that? And then it ends up displacing itself. So the upper level low ends up being on the northern side. The lower level low is down here, I believe. Where did it go? There's the lower level low, and it moves up just like that. So boom, it just kind of cycles around each other. Goes woo, and this one goes woo. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm looking at with that. Do I think December 10th should have been a high risk? No. I don't think December 10th should have been a high risk. You can have December 10th all over again, and I would still pull the trigger for moderate, because that was a bona fide moderate event. A Storm Prediction Center forecaster said it best, and I fully agree with the statement. You can have high risk level tornadoes. You can have one high risk level tornado within a moderate risk, and it still be a moderate, because you would have one high risk tornado. You wouldn't have multiple. You would just have one. It would be a long track. It would go through the entire area, but it would still be one of them. And therefore, it would constitute as a moderate because you wouldn't have everything else around it. Same premise. Sure, it was a very devastating long track supercell, but it was a moderate event. By the way, to all the people who subscribed, liked the video, and shared it and stuff like that, I really do appreciate it. I really do. It really does help out my channel and stuff like that. Once again, I will be live streaming tomorrow with the Storm Chaser, as we do have a 4 out of 5 in the severe weather scale for portions of Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And hopefully we're going to try and get some useful information out to people who may need it. Coverage over here in these areas from a news standpoint may not be the greatest. So hopefully you guys can come out here to the channel tomorrow at 12 Central Standard, maybe 1 Central Standard at the latest is when my stream would probably start. So that way we can hopefully try to spread the information. But yeah, if you want to stay tuned to the channel, highly recommend you subscribe and turn on notifications, at least for a short time period. After the stream tomorrow, you can turn off the notifications if you really want to, because I don't post, super frequently, all right? I am going through college. I am trying to, become the official meteorologist and whatnot. I won't talk about that here on stream, but I'll just say that the coming up finals is going to be a pain in my rear. And, at the end of the day, hopefully, by the end of my tenure at college, I'll have the official title of meteorologist. So that'll be something cool to boast about as I continue my career on YouTube. So that'll be nice. But, yes. Thoughts on Memphis? You're that close to the 4 out of 5 in the severe weather scale that you should probably treat it as such. Expect activity to be heightened near your area, and if the National Weather Service issues any sort of warning, please heed it. All right, more questions in the chat if you guys want to ask them. Once again, I'm going to continue to be trying to interpret this to the best of my abilities, so that way you guys can understand what is fully coming tomorrow. If you want to know what my overall opinion of what is going to be happening in this event, and you just tuned in, I highly recommend you go back to the beginning of the live stream. And if you want, put it at 2 times speed, so that way you can go at a faster version, and, or maybe 1.5 times speed, and you can listen to what my thoughts on this event are. So, does the setup allow for long track tornadoes? Yes, it does. It 100% does allow for long track tornadoes if tornadoes actually do form. What's up, Nancy? What you need? Will the enhanced risk move up to Nashville, Tennessee, or the moderate risk in the new models tomorrow? I think it's unlikely. I think this base right here, this current outlook of what the Storm Prediction Center has issued is a very good outlook that they have put out for tomorrow. And they are usually relatively accurate, just in general, 2 days out. But, for any changes to happen tomorrow, any expansion of this orange or this red, it might be very slight, but I highly doubt it is significant enough to potentially go into the places that you have mentioned, golden stallions. Thoughts on St. Louis? Unlikely. that you guys are really going to get a whole lot of stuff. As I said, if you're in the yellow, if you're in the orange, or if you're in the red, you need to watch out for the weather tomorrow. If you're in any sorts of the green, you really, I would say you shouldn't really care all too much. But yeah, I'm a weather guy. I still watch out for weather anyway. So what about the snow in Minnesota? Minnesota's going to get a lot of snow. I'll tell you that. I'll get to that in a second, actually. I want to answer a couple more questions before I get that, though. Why did all the models show this happening east of central Arkansas? Is it because of where the location of the instability is? Yes, that would be because of where the instability and the vorticity is located. So essentially the models have shown the trough becoming a lot more progressive. It's moved a lot further east because of that. How was my Thanksgiving? It was good. I actually enjoyed the food that my family had this year. We didn't have too much to the point to where we'd have leftovers for days on days this time. So I was pretty happy about that. Yeah, for sure, Sam. I'll pray for him. I would pay attention if I was in the yellow. So I call the yellow out specifically because I've seen funny stuff happen outside of the orange and the red before in the yellow. But if you think of these colors as the confidence level for where significant weather can occur, think of it almost as if it's a bullseye. So you have the outer layer, right? Then you have another layer right there. And you have another layer. And then you have another layer. So, on the other hand, you can look at it from a statistical perspective. You can say, well, this is a 1 out of 5 in the severe weather scale. That's a 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and 4 out of 5. So 4 out of 5 is 80%. You know, if you think if you have a grade on a test, well, I got an 80%. Well, that's a pretty high level of confidence that they have to issue that there could potentially be some significant weather within that area. The orange would be a 60%, and then the slight would be like a 40%. So you can think of it from a statistical perspective as well. About Athens, Alabama. Isn't Athens like over on the eastern side of Alabama? Hold up. Athens, Alabama. No, it's on the northern side. My bad. Yeesh. I think you guys could potentially see something overnight. But I think it could also be more of a damaging wind risk at that point as well. So it would really have to determine, or it would really have to depend based off of the progression from the system over there in Mississippi before it gets into Alabama. There's, once again, a lot of uncertainties within this event that could potentially even, complicate things further for even areas in the moderate risk. So that is something, isn't it? The weatherman is having complications predicting the weather. What else is new? What else is new? What else is new? But yeah, the yellow area, the orange area, and the red area, I would watch out. Definitely the red area, though. Could storms help the Mississippi River water level? Yes, it very well could, especially since you're going to get a lot of consistency from that. Now, it might be a flood threat further downstream, but yes, it definitely could help rise the water level. All right. Now I'm going to go to the snow aspect of this. So, done talking about the winter weather for right now, or for the severe weather, I should say. Talking about winter weather here real quickly. Just real quickly, though. So, obviously, Minnesota and them up there, you're going to get quite a bit of snow. And for the timings of this, let's put it up here now. I'll zoom out so you guys can see. There you go. 7Z, 8Z, 12Z. So 12Z's in the morning, 13Z, 14Z. Big band of snow that moves across. So it starts in the morning, moves off into the afternoon. Lot of snow that is anticipated, but it moves out relatively quickly. It takes about a day before the snow actually gets out entirely and moves off into Ontario. So how much do you guys actually get? Good question. Let's actually take a look at the 10-to-1 ratio, because that's kind of the base ratio for snow. And from the looks of it, about 2 to 5 inches, or 3 to 5 inches, I should say, of snow is possible, especially in the Minneapolis area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities. But as you get closer and closer towards like the Duluth area and the border of northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan, you guys could potentially even get an upwards of 10 inches of snow within that area. So that'll be something. That'll be something definitely to note. But from the NAM 3 kilometer, definitely see that. What about the HRRR though? HRRR, sometimes it goes higher than that. Yeah, it can. Maybe a foot of snow over there along the border of Wisconsin and Michigan. So that could be something. But other than that, I definitely see a good base of 3 to 5 inches of snow. 3 to 5 inches of snow is a nice base. If you get more than that, it happens. But yeah, that definitely is something to note. I also want to see, I'm going to take a sounding, because I can take snow soundings. Ooh, that saturation across the board. Even might get some dendrites. Yeah, there could even be some heavy snow amounts within that area. Yeah, there could be some heavy snow over in Mini. I would say probably the early afternoon. Early afternoon could be some very heavy snow. But there's a lot of saturation here. If we take a look at the sounding here, real quickly, I'll zoom in from the full screen perspective. You notice the green line, which is our dew point, and our red line, which is our temperature, is practically parallel across the board here from 0 kilometers all the way up. This is 3 kilometers and this is 6 kilometers. So right in the middle of that, when it starts to split off, I would say that's about 4 to 5, probably 4.5 kilometers above ground level. And because you have all that saturation, that's where all your moisture is, which can start to form dendrites or ice crystals and stuff like that. And that could potentially be something to note for, especially right within here. This is probably where you're going to see a lot of your snow start to form, which would be about 3 kilometers above ground level. So that will be something to note. And that might actually be something interesting for me to look into tomorrow during the radar coverage of the severe weather setup. I might put a radar over in Minneapolis just to actually see what the snow rates could actually be up in that area. And if I see any high snowfall rates, they could potentially lead to very low visibility. So that'd be pretty interesting. Athens, Alabama, they're right on the border of being fine, but I would watch out regardless. You guys are in the 2 out of 5 in the severe weather scale, which could lead to some significant weather within your area being possible. But notice how I didn't say likely. Up in Alaska right now, can I get a forecast for North Pole? Oh boy. North Pole, Alaska. North Pole. That's over near Fairbanks. That's kind of interesting. Jiffus, tell me something. Oh, that's not very nice. Okay, well, Pivotal Weather. As I said, I don't have my subscription to Weather Bell on me because lack of funds. So we'll roll with Pivotal Weather, and it's not like it's that bad anyways, because Pivotal Weather is actually pretty good for how cheap it actually is. Which it isn't cheap, but it's still something, you know, like, wow. Alright, so, it's gonna be cold in the North Pole. And when I mean cold, I mean stupid cold. Like negative 40. Negative 30, negative 40. Might see a warm-up potentially on Friday into Saturday. Friday into Saturday might be a slight warm-up before it gets cold again. And it gets really cold, my goodness. So cold, 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 cold. Let's see what happens. That is snow on Wednesday. Snow on Wednesday. Snow on next Tuesday. And more snow. So essentially a lot of snow and a lot of stupid cold. Yeah, that's pretty cold. I won't ask why you're in the North Pole right now, near Fairbanks, but, you know, have fun while you're up there. That is something pretty, you know, pretty cool, I must admit, though. Alright, back to the severe weather. Oh, boy. Why do I have a lot of DMs on Discord? By the way, if you guys want, okay, you guys could join my Discord server as, you know, we talk a lot about weather on there. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of talk between myself and, you know, other members of the server, which we have over, I think it's 1,600? 1,600 members? I think that sounds about right. So I'll generate the link for you guys, and if you want to join the Discord server, talk about weather and stuff like that, feel free to do so. It's right in there. And we have a lot of other people talking about it in there as well. And I also encourage you guys to talk into it as well, because I guarantee you, the people in there, you know, they may sound like they're idiots or they're, you know, stuck up. But that's just kind of how they act, and they don't mean any harm. They are, if you ask for help, they will give you help. You know, including my staff members. If you don't understand anything about weather, they will help you in talking about whatever weather you actually want, you know, to learn about. So feel free to join that if you haven't already. And if you can't get in the server for whatever reason, then you can always friend me on Discord. And in the chat is my Discord name. What about Indianola, Mississippi? Let me look at that real quickly. Oh, I didn't need to do that, did I? Lamau. Indianola, Mississippi, that is near Greenville. Yes, you guys are in ground zero. You guys are probably at the, you guys are probably going to get, or at least areas around you might get the worst impacts from the system. So I would watch out. Yep, see ya, Amy. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow, but if not, please stay safe from whatever life may hit you with. So the link isn't working, as I said. Friend me on Discord. I'll help you with it. I will definitely help you with it. But other than that, I think we should be good for the night, right? I think we can get some CP time, right? Sleep before the event tomorrow. I should, I could potentially be active on Twitter. Let's see what's happening on Twitter. Look at you guys. Wow. Bunch of retweets and whatnot. So that's pretty cool. Thank you guys so much for doing that. So that's coolio. But yeah, as I said, 12 to 1 Central Standard Time, sometime around that time is when I'm going to start streaming. I will actually create a thumbnail tonight. And then I'll upload it so that way, people can actually just talk prior to the stream. We'll have like the chat set up so that you guys can actually talk about stuff like that. But other than that, yeah. You have a question, does surface heating make lapse rates better? Yes, it does, exponentially. Lapse rates don't really matter in Dixie because anything happens in Dixie. That is incorrect. Note March 30th, 2022 for further reasoning. That was actually earlier this year. And then there were some other events too as well. Sup, Nisha? Hello, hello. Towards the end of the stream here, but nice to see you. Last thing that I want to mention. Once again, I gotta, swing home. Gotta bat it in home. Snow by Windsor, Colorado. Is there really snow by Windsor, Colorado? It's kind of funny if that's the case. But just to drive it home here, you guys. If you're in the yellow, if you're in the orange, or if you're in the red, you need to watch out for severe weather tomorrow. Either by paying attention to my live stream that I have tomorrow, or have emergency alert notifications on your phone. If you live in those areas, you need to have those notifications on your phone. So that way, when the National Weather Service or the emergency alert, notification gets sent out, it gets to your phone, you can see it. If you see it in time, you can take your proper precautions accordingly. If you're under a tornado warning, make sure you have a tornado shelter nearby. If you don't have a place to go, that would be underground or the lowest innermost part of your building, particularly a bathroom or a closet. Phone a friend. If your friends have a building, a sturdy building that is not a mobile home, please go see them. If there isn't anything nearby like that, search it up on your phone, storm shelters, or head to a local sturdy building that you see near you. If you see a sturdy building, knock on the door or get into it if they allow you to, and just hide out there until the time being. That is probably the safest way for you guys to move about. And yeah. Tyler, Texas is not going to have a tornado more than likely. Tyler, Texas is not. Way too far west. Way too far west. Same thing with Oklahoma. All right, what's happening in Windsor? Oh, you guys have a snow advisory up here, don't you? Yeah, you have a winter weather advisory with some potential snow around your area. So yeah, you're not far off. Yeah, definitely potential for some snow over in those areas. So yeah, once again, 12 to 1 Central Standard Time, PM in the afternoon, be on the channel. I'll have the waiting room ready by tomorrow morning. I'm going to get this thumbnail done tonight, so that way people can just go in and, if they want to wait, they can wait for the stream tonight if they really want to. But otherwise, it'll be up and ready tomorrow morning. So if you search my name on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. But other than that, CP time for me. I'm going to bed. I actually said 12 to 1 Central, which meant 1 to 2 Eastern. For people who might actually be confused in the chat. Regardless, I'll be streaming tomorrow, so catch me then. All right, see you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like the live stream, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, and share this with friends and family. Until then, see you guys. Goodbye. Bye, y'all.